Welcome to a This Week in South Carolina special report. I'm Gavin Jackson at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. It has been a turbulent summer in American politics. The assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump's life to President Joe Biden opting against a second-term bid, setting up his Vice President Kamala Harris to become the nominee, the first woman of African and Indian descent to do so. The move has electrified the Democratic Party in a way many say is similar to Barack Obama's 2008 run. The energy is palpable around the Democratic delegates gathered here in Chicago, where myself, reporter Maayan Schechter, and producer Amy Crouch have embedded with South Carolina's delegation for the past week, just like we covered the Republicans in Milwaukee last month. While there are no statewide Democratic elected officials like there were in the Republican delegation, South Carolina Democrats still pack a punch, especially as the state was the first in the nation primary state to nominate President Joe Biden in February. South Carolina was also the critical state for Biden in the 2020 primary, when Congressman Jim Clyburn's endorsement revitalized Biden's floundering campaign. The move solidified Clyburn's kingmaker status, prompting multiple visits to the state from administration officials over the years, including the president, vice president, and cabinet officials. I caught up with Clyburn this week after he addressed the national convention and asked him about the energy in his party and major developments over the past few months.
Well, there is a lot of energy, and it's been that way for the last couple of weeks. But what we have to be very careful of, that energy is a great thing to have. But for it to be effective, it must be harnessed, and it must be targeted. And this energy that's floating around there, we've got to put the organization in place to harness that energy, and we've got to have implementation of this campaign that will target it to be effective on election day.
Sir, what's it been like this past 4 weeks? You're a historian, you love your history. It's been a kind of a wild past month for not only the Democratic Party, but America in general. How do you sum up the past 4 weeks?
Well, you know, I study history almost daily, and I'd say to people all the time, the reason people seem to feel that these are unusual times is that they don't spend a lot of time studying our history. The history of the country is replete with these kinds of challenges along the way. In fact, I was never surprised at what was happening on January 6, 2021, because it's exactly what happened in 1876, the only time we've ever had the election thrown into the House of Representatives. And South Carolina played a critical role back in 1876, and so I was well prepared for that. So when I talk to people, I say to them, just remember, we don't want to repeat some of our history. We want to build on it. We want to continue our trek toward a more perfect union, but we should not respond to that dark past by going back to it.
Congressman, when we talk about that history, we talk about big moves that folks have done over the years. Tell me about Joe Biden, President Joe Biden, his decision not to run for that second term. How monumental you think that decision was?
It is a very monumental move because it bodes out something that Martin Luther King Jr. Said to us in one of his speeches. It does not matter how long you live, but how well you live. And I have said to Joe Biden, it does not matter how long you serve, it's how well you serve. To serve 2 terms and leave mediocre is not as good as serving 1 term and bringing this country back from the brink, setting it on course to perfection, and that's what he's done. And that is bookended by having been vice president to the first African-American president of this country, and picking as your vice president the first woman vice president, and then handed it off and endorsing what could very well be the first woman president. Nobody else will have a record as effective as his has been.
I was going to say, you kind of led into that question, but what would that mean for his legacy, for this country, should that be the case come November?
Absolutely, it would mean everything, and it would put him at a very unique place in history. And then to just look at the substance of those 4 years. Look at his legislation. How many people have passed the kind of bipartisan legislation that he has passed? How many people have broken the mold and put the first black woman on the Supreme Court, appointed more black women to courts of appeal than all other presidents combined? He has a record that is unrivaled. And I don't think anybody will measure up to that for a long, long time.
So we're just talking about the president there and his legacy, what we're going to see in the future from it. Tell me about the vice president, what you've seen from her, how she has grown over these past few years, and how you see her in this campaign, facing off against President Donald Trump, some less than 80 days away from Election Day.
Well, you know, I was following her before she became the Attorney General of California. I knew about her record. I watched her campaign for the United States Senate. In fact, I was out in California for a weekend doing that campaign, and I saw great possibilities in her. And I knew that if given the opportunity, that she would rise to the occasion. And when, as vice president, that incident occurred down in Tennessee, nobody has ever seen a state legislature react and act the way those people did to those two young African American men and the one white woman. She got on the plane and she went down there. And the speech she gave in defense of them told me she had arrived. And then she responded to the Dobbs decision, going all over this country. And I saw how she was harnessing women. I said to all of my friends, if Joe Biden decides not to run, we got to go all in for Kamala Harris. Now, a lot of people were telling me that I didn't know what I was talking about. But since I've been here, I've had more people coming up to me and saying, I question your wisdom, but not anymore.
Why do they still question you?
I don't know. After 2020, a bunch of them jumped on me before that endorsement. And I had one that said to me, sitting right there in South Carolina, you endorsed Joe Biden, and you are going to be toast. Well, I may be toast, but it's a good, delicious brown toast.
So we're just wrapping up a little bit too. You're just talking about folks and their support for Harris and how you wanted to get behind her too. What are your daughters saying? You always talk about your daughters and how
I
they feel
do
about
talk
things.
about them.
And what are their thoughts on this?
Well, you know, before I came to a final decision as to what to do in this instance, I was with my daughters. In fact, it happened to have been my birthday. I tell everybody that Joe Biden called me with his decision on the 45th anniversary of my 39th birthday. On July 21st, I turned 84 years old. I was sitting down, getting ready to have dinner with two of my daughters, with the other one on the phone. And I told them that I had just gotten a call from Joe Biden. He had just read me his statement. He was getting out of the race. And should I go all in, as I want to do, for Kamala? And my two youngest daughters who I was eating with are Deltas. And they were saying, we got to go with the AKA on this one. And so we went all in. I called my friends, who I called my kitchen cabinet, right at the time that Joe Biden put out his statement. And I told them what my feelings were and asked them what were theirs. They were all for going all in with her.
And so, sir, tell me about her pick for her running mate with Tim Walz, the governor from Minnesota. What do you think about that decision and also how that's going to position them come November when we look at these big swing states?
He's a great guy, a very unique guy. When he first ran for Congress, he called me and invited me to his district. I said, me coming to Minnesota? And remember, this is November, man, it was cold, snowing. But I went out there, spent 2 days with him and his wife. Went to that little town that he was born in. We went to the Mayo Clinic and had a town hall meeting there. I went around to small groups of farmers with him, and there was something about him that was just very unique. And then when he got elected in the district he was not supposed to get elected in, we lost a seat. We thought we were going to win in Minnesota, but we picked his up. And when he got to Congress, I got to know him, and we became real good friends. And so when the vice president called me to ask me about the 3 or 4 people that she was boiling it down to, I was able to give him a glowing recommendation. Now, everybody knew I was for the guy up there in North Carolina. I wanted Cooper, but then Cooper took himself out. Josh Shapiro and Timothy Walsh were the two people that I discussed with her.
And sir, just kind of wrapping up, I know you have things to do, but I want to ask you just about how his message is breaking through, it seems like, to a lot of those swing voters. He's talking about weird, being the Republicans having this weirdness about them.
Sure.
Is this something that is going to carry on through when it comes to breaking through to swing voters?
I think so. There's a lot of substance to him. But we live in a society where style means a lot. And a lot of people will not get to the substance if they can't accommodate the style. He has a style about him that has a certain amount of warmth and invitedness in it, and people feel drawn to him. So when he got to that word weird, I think that word stuck because it was coming from him. I could have said the same thing, and I don't think it would have gotten any traction. But when Tim said it, the way he said it, the style, it stuck. And I think that's going to happen throughout this campaign.
Congressman Jim Clyburn, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
One of Clyburn's proteges is Jamie Harrison, chairman of the Democratic National Committee, a job he secured following his time leading the South Carolina Democratic Party and his failed 2020 run against Senator Lindsey Graham. Harrison's South Carolina connection helped propel the state to becoming the first in the nation this primary cycle, partly a thank you from Biden, but also a nod to the state's early voting influence and its diverse Democratic electorate. Harrison delivered his own remarks during the convention on Monday.
This election is about those who believe anybody can achieve their dreams if they work hard and trust in the endless possibilities of America. This election is about communities who need to see that hope and joy will always overcome fear and chaos. This election is about every little boy inspired by a party chair who looks like him, and every little girl who will finally see a president who looks like her. My friends, we are paving a path for them. We're working toward a brighter future for them, and we need each and every one of you to join us.
Crystal Spain became the first black woman to lead the state party when she was chosen by fellow Democrats for the role late last year. Spain said to see a woman of color leading the ticket is something she is still in shock over and has had a palpable effect on the party. But what's it like down here?
People are excited. People are happy. People are full of joy. Like this is our big revival, and it really, really feels like a revival. Like we're going to get that last boost of energy that we need to do the work to win in November. I think it signals that we're trying to move forward. Our party is definitely doing the work to move forward. We're the party of diversity. We're the party, the big tent party. So to me, it's a big signal that we're trying to move forward and focus on qualifications and not be distracted by race and gender.
And what's it mean for you when we see maybe what the Republicans are talking about versus what the Democrats are talking about? Talking about moving forward in that agenda that we want to hear. We're going to hear from big leaders this week, including Vice President Harris.
I think Republicans are always talking about distractions because they don't have any real solutions to policies, anything to really uplift the American people. And Democrats and Kamala Harris are trying to talk about solutions and how we uplift the American people. And I think a part of that enthusiasm for her is a level of trust, that we trust her to get things done.
With South Carolina still being an early voting primary state, top Democratic officials and up-and-coming rising stars are always trying to get in front of South Carolinians when they can. And that was no different this week with the delegation breakfast here in Chicago, where a bevy of big names spoke before the delegates, including a few that campaigned in the state in 2020, like now Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg and New Jersey Senator Cory Booker.
And they're running desperately away from it because their agenda is so profoundly unpopular. So I know as Democrats, especially Democrats in redder states, we are accustomed to sometimes feeling as though we are on the short side of American public opinion, but the truth is people are with us on what to do next. And then there's results, and I think this is especially important because my fellow Democrats who've come out of often red states know that experience of trying to reach to people who maybe aren't with us on policy after policy policy, but we're trying to ask them to consider voting for us anyway, and that's why we got to talk about results. You don't have to be a Democrat to want to make sure that things are better in the future than in the past, and yet some of the things that conservative commentators want to talk about the most were worse under the Trump administration and are better under the Biden-Harris administration. Take crime, their favorite subject. It's all they want to talk about on Fox News. It is all they see when they come to a city. But if we're serious about confronting crime, let us begin by asking, why is it that violent crime went up under Donald Trump and down under the leadership of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris?
And so I just want to say really quick, this is the state that launched Joe Biden to the presidency. This is the state of Brother Clyburn, who is truly the dean of the Congressional Black Caucus. This is the state that has heroes and champions that fought for our nation, that stood for our nation, that worked for our nation, and died for our nation. And I am telling you right now, as much as we talk about the top of the ticket, this democracy was built from the grassroots up. Because in America, the power of the people is greater than the people in power.
I know you understand the burden of responsibility to protect our democracy. South Carolina is a place that picks presidents. South Carolina is a place that takes its responsibility seriously when it comes to governing this nation. South Carolina is a place where you've got giants like my friend Jim Clyburn, who understands the unique responsibility that comes to living in your state. And I understand that as you pick presidents, there are times in general elections where in some communities, in some constituencies in South Carolina, you feel like the winds are a little stronger in your face. And what I would say to you is when that wind feels stronger, that's a reason why we got to put our shoulder to the wheel even harder and push back even further, because even in those communities where at times it might feel like it's an uphill battle, that is when we have to dig deeper and push harder and go forward in a way of common purpose.
Number one, thank you. Thank you for being the linchpin that sent Joe Biden to the White House in the first place, right? Thank you for your leadership and your wisdom in continuing to send a phenomenal congressman and Jim Clyburn back every single year. He's been an incredible partner, and I just think the world of him. And I am here right now to recognize that we are feeling good. Am I right? I mean, it was a late night and an early morning, and you all look pretty damn spry. I'm proud of you. Now, I'm not here to preach, but I am a teacher. And here's what I know. In the state like Michigan, that was totally red Michigan for many years, most of the years of my life, I can tell you in 2022, we won everything from the governor's residence to the Secretary of State to the Attorney General to the state Supreme Court to the House and the Senate for the first time in 40 years. All right? And we did it because we showed up. We did the work. We went into every community. We didn't write off a county just because it looked red on a political map. We showed up.
We got 76 days in a wake-up, y'all, till Election Day. 76 days in a wake-up to go out there and make sure that it matters. 76 days in a wake-up to make sure that we do what I learned when I was 17 years old when I first joined the Army, that we leave no one behind. 76 days in a wake-up to knock on every door, to make every phone call, to call all of our friends and family, lottie-dottie, everybody, and get them all on board. Because here's what I know. When we needed it most, the Vice President was with us every step of the way. Well, I want to be clear. For the next 76 days in a wake-up, we will be with her every step of the way. We are going to win in November. We're going to earn it in November. We are going to send a message that those who came before us will hear. We're going to send a message that those who come after us will hear, that we took this moment seriously, that we stayed on our post, that we understood the assignment, and that we left no one behind, and we will have a Vice President, Kamala Harris, becoming the 47th President of the United States of America. God bless you guys, and let's go earn this win.
The South Carolina delegation is made up of 65 delegates, and we caught up with a few of them this week.
But now we have a chance. We learned from Hillary Clinton, don't leave any voters disenfranchised, don't count them out. You've got to go ask them and get them to the poll. And she was right about that. We have to engage everybody and don't just think she's got it.
And when you look at that, you look at 2016 to now 2024, and we look about Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, what's it like for you to see a woman like that in this position leading the Democratic Party?
Gives me goosebumps. Look at how far we've come. First of all, just to have the right to vote, we had to fight for that. Women are still fighting. It's 2024. Just to have a black woman on the Supreme Court, and now we're going to have a black woman at the top of the ticket for the President of the United States.
Well, I think first of all, it's a new generation of leadership. It's a new leader who's going to hopefully push us into the future instead of backwards, as we've seen, with the Trump administration and with that campaign. I also think she has been committed to making progressive wins for a lot of young folks who care about these issues, and she's been championing them. She's been a voice for young folks at the table, and I know that every time she sees young people in a room, she gravitates towards us. She wants to hear what we have to say, and I also think as a young South Asian woman, to have a role model like her, to have someone who I can look up to, who's breaking the biggest glass ceiling that we see, who's going to be our next president, is something that's so inspiring, and hopefully she won't be the last.
Of course, Thursday was the convention's biggest night, with Vice President Kamala Harris giving her acceptance speech. This came after a surprise appearance and welcome on Monday before the convention hall. Harris was also campaigning in swing states this week as well. She has been crisscrossing the country since she became the head of the ticket on July 30th. On Thursday night, her message of optimism amped up the party faithful, with just 74 days to go until the election.
On behalf of everyone whose story could only be written in the greatest nation on earth, I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America. Our nation, with this election, has a precious, fleeting opportunity to move past the bitterness, cynicism, and divisive battles of the past, a chance to chart a new way forward. Not as members of any one party or faction, but as Americans. We can create an earned pathway to citizenship and secure our border. And America, we must also be steadfast in advancing our security and values abroad. As Vice President, I have confronted threats to our security, negotiated with foreign leaders, strengthened our alliances, and engaged with our brave troops overseas. As Commander-in-Chief, I will ensure America always has the strongest, most lethal fighting force in the world. And I will fulfill our sacred obligation to care for our troops and their families, and I will always honor and never disparage their service and their sacrifice. And let me be clear, I will always stand up for Israel's right to defend itself, and I will always ensure Israel has the ability to defend itself, because the people of Israel must never again face the horror that a terrorist organization called Hamas caused on October 7, including unspeakable sexual violence, and the massacre of young people at a music festival. At the same time, what has happened in Gaza over the past 10 months is devastating. So many innocent lives lost. Desperate, hungry people fleeing for safety over and over again. The scale of suffering is heartbreaking. President Biden and I are working to end this war such that Israel is secure, the hostages are released, the suffering in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, security, freedom, and self-determination.
It was a historic week here in Chicago, with Vice President Kamala Harris accepting the nomination of the Democratic Party as the first woman of color ever to do so, capping a whirlwind 4 weeks. With money and momentum on her side, we'll be covering the sprint to Election Day on November 5th here on This Week in South Carolina at cetv.org/SC2024, and of course on the South Carolina Lead podcast. For South Carolina ETV, I'm Gavin Jackson, Chicago. Be well, South Carolina.